Welcome to this lecture 2 on perspectives of Indian society. Today we are starting with Indology of G.S. Ghurye. We had completed till the basic introduction of Indology. So Govind Sadashiv Ghurye, G.S. Ghurye, was born in a Brahmin family and was a trained Sanskrit scholar. Alright, so he was born in a Brahmin family and was a trained Sanskrit scholar. To develop his Indological perspective, he profoundly studied Vedas, Shastras, and the poetry of Kalidas among other traditional texts. Alright, so these are the things he studied to develop his Indological perspective. That means he did a very detailed study of Vedas, of Shastras, of poetry of Kalidas, of various other works. Alright, so he read Indology in detail. G.S. Ghurye. He was also greatly influenced by Western scholars like W.H.R. Rivers. He pioneered a modern Indology which improved upon the narrow view of Indian society taken by classical Indology. Alright, so he pioneered modern Indology and which improved upon the narrow view of Indian society taken by classical Indology. That means classical Indology was a narrow view, and when he pioneered modern Indology, he took a broad view of as compared to classical Indology, which was narrow view, and he was greatly influenced by Western scholars like W.H.R. Rivers. You have to remember the name of W.H.R. Rivers when you study G.S. Ghurye. She was influenced by W.H.R. Rivers. Alright. Then Ghurye played a key role in professionalization of sociology by founding the Indian Sociological Journal. Alright, the Sociological Bulletin. Indian Sociological Society and its journal Sociological Bulletin. So Indian Sociological Society he found out, and Sociological Bulletin, its journal, he found out, thus getting rid of some of the infirmities of classical sociology. Alright, these things you have to remember. He wrote more than 30 pioneering books which enriched the nascent discipline to a great extent. He also encouraged and mentioned a large number of noted students like M.N. Srinivas, mentored a large number of noted students like M.N. Srinivas. So M.N. Srinivas used to be a student of G.S. Ghurye. Alright, A.R. Desai, M.S.A. Rao, Iravati Karve, I.P. Desai. Alright, so do you know who was I.P. Desai? I.P. Desai. I.P. Desai, if I'm not wrong, was I'll have to search about I.P. Desai, but he was mentored by G.S. Ghurye, as we can see. And who was M.S.A. Rao? He was also, I think, associated with the Southern Sociological School, if I'm not wrong, but you'll have to check, because as far as I can remember, he wrote something about social movements. So just check and tell me. So who enriched the sociological, anthropological traditions in India and various perspectives. So when there are these sociological thinkers, we have to think a little bit. But when we are well versed, okay, this person contributed to Marxism and there were other people also who contributed to Marxism, then we are clear, okay, these are the fellows. These were the thinkers, the sociologists. Alright, then we become a little clear. So in Ghurye's Indology, the culture is the central element throughout his work. Alright, so he focused on culture. Alright, he understands society in terms of Sanskritic texts, historical documents, and other archaeological material, and also supplements it with theoretical perspectives. Alright, so theory is there, plus his cultural texts are there. Alright, so Ghurye developed his methodology after studying large number of classical texts. His ideological view was also influenced by Bhandarkar Institute of Pune. His approach was actually a combination of historical diffusionistics and descriptive ethnography. So he used this approach in which he combined the historical diffusionist. Who gave the diffusionist approach, do you know, of sociology? Diffusionist. See, it was primarily opined by the anthropologists. Alright, so basically you will remember in this diffusionist approach about W.J. Perry. Alright, he believed that all human organizations or associations, you can say civilizations, actually are associated in a single center and then they spread out. So that is what they call diffusionist approach. Alright, so and then spread to the rest of the world. So this is also known as the descriptive. Along with that, descriptive ethnography was there. So this is also known as the British school of diffusionism. So Indian traditions were seen as a diffusion from one place to another, resulting in a unity of society. His descriptive ethnography was very much rooted in empirical reality. Alright, so in empirical reality, that means it was something very scientific he proposed. That is why we say here that he actually pioneered Indology, which improved the narrow view of society taken by classical sociology. Alright, so modern form of Indology he pioneered. Because the works were being studied by historians also, so now sociology had to develop into a discipline which was very much unique. That was the task, and that task was accomplished by Govind Sadashiv Ghurye. Alright. Then his view on Indian society can be seen in terms of overall view of the society as well as in terms of his specific views on various elements of the society. So his general view of society was that Indian society is unique and it should be understood in terms of the concepts and theories particular to the Indian society only. According to him, Indian society is a Hindu society and it cannot be understood without understanding Hindu tradition. Alright, so he actually focused upon the Hindu society concept. He emphasized upon the understanding of Hindu tradition rather than suggesting solutions to the problems faced by Hindu society. And Indian society is viewed as a continuity from past in form of its historical mournings. Alright, so there are historical mournings and now it is viewed in a continuity. He also emphasized on understanding order and change in society. So order is understood in terms of specific aspects of society like caste, religion, village, tribe and urbanization. Alright, so order and change. He took dynamic view of Indian society not only in terms of continuities from the past but also in terms of understanding the process of change in terms of British influence. So the process of change is understood in terms of changing Hindu traditions. He refrained from mentioning any great modernizing influence of the British rule. Alright, so he refrained, like he did not mention any great modernizing influence of the British rule. So actually this is against what Britishers called the white man's burden. Who actually introduced the white man's burden? It was actually introduced by Rudyard Kipling in his poem. There was one poem about Philippine American War, which was I think till 1902, the war, and in that particular poem it was mentioned by Rudyard Kipling, the white man's burden, that the basic colonial expansion was to actually benefit or uplift the non-white population, which was not actually the case. So he refrained from mentioning great modernizing influence of the British rule. His specific views about caste are mentioned in his various works. His first book, Caste and Race in India, 1932, is regarded as a classic in this field. He gave the theory of origin of the caste as well and said that caste originated from Gangetic plains and spread to other areas. Alright, so his theory was regarding the origin of caste. He highlighted his diffusionist approach, which was in turn influenced by British diffusionist traditions. Alright, so everything was highlighted in his diffusionist approach. He took an attributional approach of the caste. He understood caste in terms of various features. He mentioned 6 features of caste as division of labor, principle of purity and pollution, hierarchy, civil and religious disabilities, hereditary nature and endogamy. So basically endogamy. So basically the 6 features of caste were mentioned by G.S. Ghurye. Alright, so you can say here 6 features of caste. Who mentioned the 6 features of caste? G.S. Ghurye. He also stressed on adopting comparative perspective rather than treating caste as completely unique institution. Alright, so comparative perspective उठाओ, ऐसे नहीं कि caste को आप unique institution कह दो. There has to be a comparison. Caste को compare करो कि कैसे caste पहले थी, कैसे caste अभी है और कैसे caste evolve हो रही है. Endogamy is regarded as a what is regarded by Ghurye as the key principle which maintains boundaries of caste. He also draws parallel between caste and tribe and calls for caste and tribe. Alright, and calls tribals backward Hindus. Who called tribal as backward Hindus? G.S. Ghurye. Alright, here you will find it out. Alright, he also talked about status of caste in modern times. He saw formation of caste associations as spreading caste consciousness and referred to it as caste patriotism. Alright, so caste associations were forming and spreading, and he referred to them as caste patriotism. He was firmly opposed to the caste system. He believed disappearance will be gradual and will be brought about by the influence of urbanization, education, etc. And these are the social changes we are observing. है ना, social structure is changing. Alright, so the social changes, the unit visions of social change, when we will study, then we will understand how urbanization is a factor which has led to evolution of caste structure. So while his maiden work was confined to caste and race alone, later he diversified his work to include other dimensions like occupation and class to bring some dynamism in the concept of caste. Alright, so other works were there, occupation was there, class was there. Here you see occupation and class. Alright. To bring some dynamism in the concept of caste. He also wrote extensively on religion and wrote many books including Indian Sadhu and God and Men 1962. Alright, 1952 Indian Sadhu and God and Man 1962. These two books. Okay. He saw religion as dynamic as Indian society. He didn't see it from an orthodox point of view, and he even offered rational explanation. He also didn't see religious diversity as contradictory. For example, in his book Indian Sadhu 1952, he saw sadhus as a social link between the spiritual people and the common people. In his book Ghuri also explored the genesis and development of organization, asceticism of Hindu religion, and the role of sadhus or ascetics who have played in the organization and maintenance in the, you can say, cultural maintenance of the Indian society. So the role of sadhus he examined, how ascetics have played a unique role in the evolution and the maintenance of the Hindu society. Alright, so G.S. Ghuri was a very, you can say, rational man who was trying to understand the role of religious diversity and who was trying to examine the orthodox points of views. So that is why when he examined the Hindu society, he did not limit himself to the religion, but he also examined the religious practices in detail. Alright, so we have to remember this. According to Ghuri, the religion is at the center of the total cultural heritage of man. Alright. In his another book, here we will see his another book. The name of the book is Religious Consciousness 1965. Alright. Religious Consciousness 1965. Alright, Ghuri analyzed the three of the oldest human civilizations, namely Mesopotamian, Egyptian and Hindu. Alright, so he analyzed in his book Religious Consciousness 1965. He analyzed Mesopotamian civilization, Egyptian and Hindu. So while he was analyzing these three, he must have analyzed the Indus Valley civilization also, along with their connections to religious practices like worshipping, afterlife and mythology. So in his views on tribes, are also influenced by Hindu traditional views of life. Alright, so what Hindu traditional views of life are there? That we have to keep learning, and we have to learn from the surroundings, like the five, you can say, the punch, what do you call them? The five surrounding elements, five elements, and they are the air, ether, water, and more, है ना? You tell me in the comment section. I'm unable to recall all of them right now. So he rejected the British policy of isolation, and for him tribes have always been in contact with Hindus and they have assimilated themselves into the mainstream in various degrees. He called tribes as backward Hindus. Alright, as we studied, he called tribes as backward Hindus and differentiated them as Hinduized tribes. Alright, partially Hinduized tribes and hill section. So three sections he made. Hill section is still followed, like hill section tribes different and the plateau section tribes different, but he classified them as Hinduized, partially Hinduized and hill section. Many people differentiate tribes in these aspects. According to him, the backwardness was due to imperfect integration in Hindu society. Alright, they were imperfectly integrated. He cited examples of Santhals, Bhils and Gonds who live in southern central India and had integrated into Indian society to different degrees. He also studied the impact of outsiders and considered it as a result of British policy. Alright, outsiders on tribal culture. what are the impacts of outsiders on the tribal culture, and how outsiders, like basically when we refer to them as the Britishers or Portuguese, so how they affected the tribal culture in general. So they relied on what, on resources. So when they were doing resource extraction, they were actually doing nuisance with the tribal culture. And when they were doing nuisance with the tribal culture, they framed their own laws. Like for tribes, they particularly called them like very habitual criminals. Habitual offenders act was repealed after independence, so they were considered habitual offenders. Alright, so they also disregarded the Britishers, and Britishers also disregarded them completely. This was there. Alright, so what is written? Britishers never followed appropriate policy for the development of tribes. Instead, forest policy of British brought huge hardship on tribes. Apart from providing general overview of tribal societies, he also wrote on specific tribes such as Kolis of in Maharashtra. Alright, KOLIs, Kolis of Maharashtra, and Ghurie's work on tribal society came at a time when majority of the established colonial anthropologists and administrators were of the opinion that the separate identity of the tribals had to be maintained at any cost. So Ghurie debunked the idea of isolation, and he even ideologically debated with Elwin over the issue. Alright, so who was Elwin now? When he was saying that isolation should not happen, they should be integrated into the mainstream society. Now tell me, who was Elwin with which G.S. Ghurie debated? So like basically you can say that he was a anthropological thinker, sociological, you can say sociological, not thinker, but basically analyst. Alright, sociological analyst. Who was trying to study the society at that point of time. And I think it is a PYQ also that we had, like in sociology optional only, we had this PYQ. The question, if I'm not wrong, was something like elaborate on this debate only over the tribal development. Alright, between Elwin, he was Verrier Elwin. I was thinking something else. Yes, Verrier Elwin and G.S. Ghurie. So basically, what did Elwin propose? Elwin actually had the isolationist approach in mind, and Ghurie had the assimilationist approach in mind. Alright, so in this regard, you have to see that isolation versus integration, the government has always preferred integration over isolation, because isolation can only be done for a few tribes and it cannot go into continuity. Alright, so as I said, Elwin, when I was thinking about Elwin, yes, he was anthropologist and some tribal activist or sociological analyst, you can say, who became a citizen of India later. And then there was a debate, and then the government of India also adopted the Ghurie's approach only. But again, isolationist approach is also regarded as a very crucial approach to our understanding. It is very you can say very important to distinguish like the kind of the tribals who live in a particular society, then the kind of their preferences, they also matter. So he argued that the incorporation of Hindu values and norms into tribal life was a positive step in the process of tribal development. He also expressed his views on village life in India. Alright, so now we have a new thing by Ghurie, village life in India. According to him, villages were the center of Indian social life, but he rejected self-sufficiency view of the Western scholars. Alright, so Western scholars said that they are self-sufficient, but he said no, he rejected this self-sufficient view. His understanding of the village was drawn mainly from the caste system. He had totally ignored actual structures operating within the villages, which are highlighted by various other scholars in terms of dominant castes. Alright, so basically he understood the caste system, that the caste system is operating at the grassroots level in the village. So everything is happening according to the caste system. It may be marriage, it may be kinship relations, it may be the basic norms. Everything is according to the caste system. So there were actual structures which are actually there in the system apart from the caste system, which is the dominant caste the dominant caste, the caste class nexus. All of that was also operating. Like when M.N. Srinivas, his students, studied the villages, what did M.N. Srinivas do? M.N. Srinivas said that in the villages there's a process called Sanskritization which is happening. So there is a conversation or a amalgamation of various castes, and then they decide like which caste they want to become. So they kind of imitate like the caste they want to become. So imitation is there. So if there is a caste, for example, who is economically rich, but not like caste wise in the pyramid, might be Kshatriya, might not be Brahmin. So economically rich, so the people of the village who are like backward caste, who form the majority, will follow Kshatriya. But if Brahmins are economically rich, then the people of another village where Brahmins are rich will follow Brahmin practices. So now the Kshatriya might be eating non-veg, might not be eating non-veg. So then the practices will also be like that only. It is not necessary that they are following Brahmins only who do not eat non-veg. So non-vegetarianism is also optional as per the economically rich caste. So if they want to choose, they will go with economic richness, then they will do Brahmin, Kshatriya, whosoever is rich. It may be Vaishya also, and their practices like non-vegetarianism, reading the Shastras, the two Janehus and everything, whatever are there, the practices, Kshatriyas also, Brahmins also. Now they have to decide. These are the people, many people. Now they will decide, okay, I want to go with Kshatriya because they are economically rich. Okay, I want to go with Brahmins because they are economically rich. The people decide. So that is Sanskritization, how it was operating at the grassroots level. And M.N. Srinivas studied this in his village studies. Alright. He studied Rampur village also. There were other places also he studied. So the concept of dominant caste and class network was not actually incorporated by G.S. Ghurye. So this was something which you can say as a criticism to his study, or something which he ignored. Alright, but yes, he studied about the caste system from he studied about the villages from the caste system. Alright, so if there is a differentiation question between M.N. Srinivas concept of caste system and G.S. Ghurye concept of caste system, you can easily incorporate this into your answer. Alright, and in respect to the study of village life, because M.N. Srinivas did a field based study. Alright, do you know what was the name of the unique method which M.N. Srinivas incorporated in his study? What was the name of the method? The name of the method was participant observation. Alright, the field view method. Or you can say, yes, the field view method only. Within the perspective of structural functionalism, he was doing the field view method, and he was doing, you can say, like, he was influenced by his mentor. His mentor was A.R. Radcliffe Brown. Alright, so he was influenced by him, and with his study only he was drawing macro and micro linkages. So he had an optimistic view of urbanization. We are talking about G.S. Ghurye, okay? Had a very optimistic view of urbanization, okay? He rejected Louis Wirth's pessimistic view of urban growth in the form of excessive individualism. So Louis Wirth was saying that urban growth leads to excessive individualism. Alright, Louis Wirth said that he was very pessimistic, like urban view is leading to individualism, is leading to isolation. So he considered urban areas as a cradle of innovation, as cradle of innovation. So what is a cradle? Cradle is where life blooms. Basically a small child is there in the cradle only, cradle or cradle, whatever you call it. Alright, so innovation happens. Innovation starts actually when there is urbanization, according to G.S. Ghurye. So he was fighting with Louis Wirth over over the urbanization phenomena, whether it is good or bad. So Louis Wirth said no, it is bad. G.S. Ghurye said no, it is good. Alright, so according to him, urban and rural areas are organically linked, and their growth is also connected. So they grow in a connected manner, like they have a connected fabric of growth. Alright, see here, in all his works he provided detailed historical descriptions of the phenomena that he studied. Alright, so he studied everything from detailed historical perspective, and he didn't aim at providing grand theoretical frameworks but preferred to stick to detailed description of social phenomena. Alright, so he did not provide any grand frameworks. Alright, in sociology, when we study about the grand framework approach, which sociologist are we referring to? Can you guess which sociologist grand framework? Actually, like, as it is there, grand sociology is basically something which is analyzed by American sociologists, specifically Talcott Parsons. So even C. Wright Mills calls grand theory in his book The Sociological Imagination, but Parsons' framework was the grand theory framework. Alright, so according to the grand theory framework, we are not going into Western sociology, but there are various theories, like middle range theories were given by Robert Merton, grand theories were given by Talcott Parsons. Alright, so he also took pride in the nationalistic tradition and was reluctant to accept frameworks which were not developed in India. In fact, all his works were almost theoretical, though he was well acquainted with the existing theories. He even tried to enter a dialogue with Toynbee and Spengler and Bertrand Russell. Alright, so he was debating his theoretical frameworks he was developing. Alright. Okay, so due to his ideological orientations, he also entered into a debate with Verrier Elwin, as we said, regarding the Hindu origin of tribals. He talked about integration approach, and Verrier Elwin talked about isolationist approach. So his works were reflected in the struggle of new discipline in the Indian context. Gourier is also criticized, like now we have this criticism. What is Gourier's criticism? Criticized for over Hinduized view. Alright, when you were studying Gourier, you also wanted to criticize him for this? Okay. And he also took a favorable view of castes and failed to see dehumanizing aspect. Alright, so he failed to see the dehumanizing aspect of caste. This is the second thing. Alright, he took a favorable view of caste. He was having a highly Hinduized view. He failed to recognize qualitative changes that have occurred during the colonial rule. Alright. He also failed to explore structural implications of various social institutions like caste, and he only focused on cultural aspects. Alright, so the structural functional tradition, now we will see how the structural functional tradition in India developed in 1940s and is considered an important development in understanding of Indian society. So after independence, with the establishment of a welfare state, sociologists were oriented towards developing systemic view that could provide critical input for planning. Emergence of this perspective in India can be traced back to initial sociologists who got their training under Western and primarily American anthropologists and sociologists. Alright, so during this period, this perspective was quite popular in America in the writings of Talcott Parsons, Merton. Alright, who is Merton? You know who is Merton? Yes, Davis and Moore and Talcott Parsons. And in Europe in the writings of Radcliffe Brown and Malinowski. Alright. So M.N. Srinivas is considered to be the first sociologist who systematically used this perspective for understanding of cults of Mysore. So this was his first systematic understanding of cults of Mysore, which was built upon the structural functionalist view. Srinivas, M.N. Srinivas, okay, was not much impressed by American functionalism and rather followed the British tradition of field study based approach. Alright, so he was not much impressed by American functionalist approach and rather followed the British field study based approach. Alright, so American functionalism he did not follow much. He followed the British tradition in which the field study was elaborated. So within, as we saw in his structural functionalism, he will elaborate on the field study. Okay. Although W.H. Weiser had used had used this perspective for highlighting the functional importance of the Jajmani system. Srinivas highlighted this perspective for understanding the whole of the society. So as we know, W.H. Weiser studied the Jajmani system. Alright, and he used this particular approach of field study to study the Jajmani system. W.H. Weiser. Srinivas applied this perspective to understanding of the whole society. Yes, he understood the functional importance of Jajmani system, but then it was largely criticized also. Okay, so this perspective became more important as it used the field view to provide actual view of reality. For example, Srinivas made intensive field study of the Kurks to generate a functional empirical understanding of their society. Apart from Srinivas, S.C. Dubey also used field studies component. I talked about S.C. Dubey when I was giving you the master class over the sources. Alright. So S.C. Dubey also used field studies to complement this perspective during numerous village studies. So the prevailing perspectives like Indological, anthropological, economic and philosophical suffered from one deficiency or another. Alright. So there were various perspectives. So the major premises first we will study of this perspective, which is the structural functionalist and the field study based. So we have to start with structural functionalism and we have to compare it vis-a-vis the study of M.N. Srinivas. So firstly, it aimed at studying the pattern of relationships, social institutions and their working in the society in a holistic manner. Okay, so for example, M.N. Srinivas in a study of Kurks of Mysore not only gave an ethnographic account of Kurk society but also developed a holistic picture of solidarity amongst Kurks. So, in terms of their beliefs, customs, religion, family. Alright. More importantly, existing socio-political framework was taken into account through a field view. So, he presented a field view, as we have studied within the structural functionalism, to analyze the socio-political framework. This perspective attempted to develop an interpretation of a particular social phenomena in functional terms within the larger sociological context. So, for example, studies on family in India emphasized upon understanding its significance in the context of Indian society rather than simply studying it as a type of family. Alright, so what is the significance of joint family in Indian society? How care economy shaped rural, agrarian, you can say, and then we have joined to nuclear movement. Everything we understand from the significance point of view. In this context, studies conducted by K.M. Kapadia, Karve, Iravati Karve, etc. are very significant. Alright, so this is the second thing, this is the first thing. Now we have the third thing. Structural functionalist perspective in India also took into account the actual structural cleavages and social differentiation in the society. Alright, so it actually took into account these things. It tried to break the mold of a timeless and unchanging Indian society and brought the much needed dynamism in the sociological studies. Alright, this made the sociological understanding more empirical and contextual. In this, functions were seen not only from cultural angle but also from the views of changing structural context. Alright, so this perspective, fourth point, also emphasized upon comparative understanding of various social institutions while taking into consideration various variations and their implications on a wider society. So initially, structural functional perspective was confined to anthropological view. But during the 1960s and 70s, studies focused on a particular phenomena or institutions from purely structural functional perspective. Alright. So there were various studies which focused on structural functional perspective, which evolved with time. Like firstly we had the anthropological view, like as we studied about Malinowski and other various thinkers who applied this perspective, Radcliffe Brown. So then we will have the evolution of the particular framework. So like its original framework in the West, structural functionalism in India also suffered from several limitations and was criticized. These are the limitations. Firstly, the perspective ignored the conflict in the Indian society. In the Indian society there was a conflict and it was ignored. Like we are telling here the Marxist criticism. Alright. Social institutions may be dysfunctional and causing conflict in society. For example, caste is more dysfunctional than functional. Srinivas is often criticized for upholding caste values through concepts of dominant caste and Sanskritization. So he holds the upper caste values. Sorry, criticized for holding the upper caste values. This was the problem. Okay. See, this perspective is considered status quoist. So status quoism is there. Status quoism will always be a problem with structural functionalism, that it is status quoist. Generally, social patterns were considered desirable and functional in a broader context. Alright, so this was there. Thirdly, it lacked purity in its application owing to influence of other perspectives. Cultural influence was quite marked in the study of structures. Structural functionalism in India was never used in the similar manner as it was used in Western and American, to be precise, sociology. Alright, so it was used in a modified manner, and it lacked purity in its application due to other perspectives. So we saw three criticisms. Firstly, conflict was ignored. Caste, upper caste values were upholded as per M.N. Srinivas. This was one of the criticism, but they can be wrong also, they can be right also. Dominant caste, Sanskritization are examples. Status quoist. Then the third thing, lacked purity. Alright, lacked purity in its application. Alright, owing to influence of other perspectives. So we see the cultural influence which was quite marked due to the study of other structures. Alright, now we will see structural functionalism of M.N. Srinivas. Now we will elaborate upon M.N. Srinivas. So, one second. Here you go. Alright, Mysore Narsimhacharya Srinivas pioneered the structural functionalism in India through his path-breaking work on Courts of Mysore in 1940. Alright, so 1940 he did work over the Courts of Mysore. Alright, Courts of Mysore in 1940. It was a holistic study of the Court society, and he analyzed how different cultural elements contribute to solidarity of the Court society. Okay. However, unlike his Western counterparts like Parsons, he did not take any fancy flights formulating grand theories. Alright, as we saw, Parsons was associated with grand theories. He did not take fancy flights of formulating the grand theories. So he was also perhaps the first sociologist who developed his perspective by deviating from a purely Indological view. So he is the first. Alright, his major contribution was to challenge the then prevailing dominant paradigm and focused on understanding Indian society from purely textual point of view. And in this process, he ushered in newer frameworks for understanding Hindu society and in particular Indian society. So he was a framework developer. Alright, or you can say a better word, framework pioneer of structural functionalist thought. Alright, his structural functionalism was a blend of approaches used by Radcliffe, Brown and Pritchard. Alright, so there were Pritchard. Alright, Pritchard. Blend of approaches used by Brown and Pritchard, under whom he received his sociological training in Britain. Alright. Radcliffe, Brown we studied now. So his structural functionalism was a blend of approaches used by these two people. These two people used a blend of approaches. He developed his structural functionalism, and he was mentored by whom? Radcliffe, Brown in Britain, and Pritchard also. And then he had his own mentors like G.S. Ghorie. Alright, so he used structural functionalism of Brown and anthropological fieldview of Pritchard. Alright, structural functionalism of Brown, anthropological fieldwork of Pritchard. At the same time, he was also critical of the American influence on Indian society. Though the institutions like Ford Foundation as the American social scientists were viewed as promoting American values in the garb of making sociology a significant discipline, he blended theoretical structural functionalism with empirical work, and as a result he studied the smaller constituents of society like villages and functional wholes. So he used the method of direct observation to study Kurk society. Ethnographic elements we introduced kare. His approach also took into account the Indological views, so influence of which cannot be ignored. See, M.N. Srinivas on village. What is it written? The work of Srinivas was pioneering in village field of village studies. According to him, villages were focal points of understanding Indian society. He refuted the logic of cultural theorists like Dumont that only caste should be focused upon understanding the Indian society. Dumont focused only on caste. He took two-pronged approach in studying Indian villages through field studies and historical analysis. According to him, ethnographic account of villages was necessary to study the process of change and village dynamics. Alright, at the same time, he found the use of historical analysis to counter the argument. that the village was unchanging unit of self-sufficiency. So according to him, villages had served as a unifying entity, and village unity was quite significant in rural life, social life. Village studies, according to him, provided the opportunity of this. So he also pioneered village studies because of his study of court society and sociology in the context of newly independent nation. So village studies was very important, and the contribution of M.N. Srinivas to village studies is regarded as very important because he was the pioneer. Alright. Srinivas had a systems view of Indian society which was derived from his own micro study of small community based organizations. Alright, so he had a systems view. We will study the systems view also. He studied Indian society in terms of patterns of relations and social institutions and their working in society in a holistic manner. Srinivas interpreted a particular social phenomena like caste, family, religion in functional terms. Alright. Within the larger context of Indian society, his study on quirks, he described the concept of functional unity and established interpretations in the context of various rituals followed by quirks. He also took a comparative view of Indian society by studying the same phenomena within a specific regional context. He understood order and change as well. Order is understood in the terms of caste, village, religion, etc. He is also known for understanding the dynamics of Indian society, and he emphasized upon understanding cultural changes leading to change in Indian society. Alright, so the study of Indian society through institution of caste dominated his writings. His concept of dominant caste in his study of village Rampura and his concept of Sanskritization in the study of course of Mysore highlighted. Alright, Sanskritization is studied in Mysore. Sanskritization with the courts of Mysore and dominant caste in the study of Rampura. Alright. He also studied the process of change in detail in his book Social Change in Modern India 1962. Alright, Social Change in Modern India 1962 is very famous book. This you have understood. Rampura and Sanskritization Mysore. Social Change in Modern India 1962 through his twin concepts Westernization and Sanskritization. His monumental work, The Remembered Village, 1976, is still considered a classic in the field of sociological village studies. Alright. Sociological field studies. It was an outcome of 11 months he spent in Karnataka village, which he names as Rampura in 1948, which he visited subsequently as well in 1964. Alright, apart from the above general view of Indian society, he had also specific views on various other sociological institutions. His understanding of caste is primarily driven from numerous field studies which combine theory with practice. So it has a lot of Indological elements into it, but also more oriented towards operational aspects. So his concept of Sanskritization, dominant caste and vote bank gave practical view of the Indian society. So these concepts gave practical view, and they were a radical shift from Indological view. He viewed Indian village as a prototype of Indian society or a microcosm of Indian society. Alright. And like Gori, he also rejected the colonial notions of self-sufficiencies in Indian village. Village exogamy is one of the prime examples that underscores village as interdependent. Alright, village exogamy. He considered village to be integrated to the wider society. He saw family, marriage and Jajmani system also central to the understanding of village and caste. One of the major criticism of his writings and his approach is that his focus remained on community and caste. Alright, his focus remained on community and this was the problem. Why he focused on community and caste? His Sanskritization shows that. What does it show? Like, how do we know? Dominant caste shows that he was studying. He was doing village studies. So this was the one of the major thing which we can highlight. Alright. This remained as his criticism. So what did criticizers say? That okay, he is now focusing only on community and caste. Of G.S. Gori also it was said that he focused more on caste. Like he laid emphasis on Hinduism and then he focused on caste also a lot. and he ignored the negative aspects of caste. G.S. Gore, alright, he didn't. M.N. Srinivas, alright, M.N. Srinivas did not develop the macro understanding of Indian society similar to the one developed by other functionalists. Further, his methodology of focusing on a single village also left little scope for generalization despite being rich in depth. Alright, so now we see Sanskritization. See, Sanskritization was studied by M.N. Srinivas in his village of Kurg. Alright, so the term village in Kurg. Alright, so his term Sanskritization was coined by M.N. Srinivas, and he defined it as the process. It is the process. I explained to you Sanskritization above, by which a low caste or tribe or other group takes over the customs, rituals, beliefs, ideology, style of life of the high, in particular twice born Dvija caste. Alright. It is an endogenous source of social change. Alright, so the term Sanskritization was coined and used by M.N. Srinivas to describe the process of cultural and social mobility in the traditional social structure of Indian society. It was he first propounded it in his book Religion and Society Among Kurds of South India, 1952. So cultural social mobility is happening. Okay. And it existed even before colonialism. That means it is deep rooted. It is a old system. However, secularization, westernization and modernization started in India only after the arrival of the British. So the idea is path breaking because it introduced and validated field work as an essential component in developing understanding of Indian society. Alright, so it was based on field work. The impact of Sanskritization is manifold. Its influence can be seen in language, literature, ideology, music, dance, drama, style of life and ritual. All of these things. The process gained momentum after the arrival of the British. As means of communication hastened the process, and its impact was felt even in the remotest corners of the villages. So in a study among the Kurds of the erstwhile state of Mysore, he found that lower castes, in order to raise their position in the caste hierarchy, adopted some Brahminical customs and gave up some of their own so which was considered to be impure by higher caste. For example, they gave up meat eating, consumption of liquor and offering animal sacrifice to the deities. They even imitated Brahmins in terms of, so this was what they did in terms of dress, food, rituals. By doing so, within a generation or so, they could claim higher positions in the social order. In other words, they thought that the higher caste should accept them as their equals and would treat them with honor and dignity when they do this. Alright, so this is the process of social mobility which M.N. Srinivas had used. Mobility, and Srinivas had first used the term Brahmanism. Alright, first he used Brahmanism to denote this. Sanskritization is a much broader concept than Brahmanization. In many cases, the higher castes were not Brahmins. Alright, they were Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and higher Shudras. That is why I was saying it depends on economic status. Shudras in various religions of the country, thus desanskritization and even tribalization occurs when non-Brahmins and tribes respectively are the dominant groups. Alright. So that is also happening. Non-Brahmins, dominant groups, desanskritization will also happen. Basically, the Brahmins will actually imitate the Kshatriyas in order to gain economic mobility. So we will see the criticism and all of this. Then westernization concept we will do tomorrow. Major features associated with the concept of Sanskritization are: Sanskritization of a group usually has the effect of improving its position. Alright, so there is mobility in local caste hierarchy. That is, it does not lead to a change in macro Varna framework. It normally presupposes either an improvement in the position of a group concerned or a higher group self-consciousness resulting from its contact with the source of great tradition of Hinduism. Alright, so that improves. As the pilgrim center or monastery is a proselytizing sect, the Sanskritization is thus an endogenous and localized version of social change. So when we are defining social change, we can mention in addition that Sanskritization is an endogenous and a localized version of social change. Sanskritization suggests a process whereby people want to improve their status through adoption of names and customs of culturally higher placed groups. So basically, a reference model framework is usually financially better off as well. So basically, the reference model of whom the imitation is taking place, that model is mostly financially better off. It is primarily a process that takes place mainly within the Hindu spaces, though Srinivas argued that it was visible even in the sects and religious groups outside Hinduism, like Islam also had, like Christians also had, but basically it is usually understood within Hindu space because caste is usually understood within the Hindu space. Alright. Studies of different areas, however, show that it is operated differently in different parts of the country. Like there are other processes also with regard to the other religions which operate like the same process also with regards to the other religions. Alright, but briefly it is understood in Hindu domain. So in those areas where a highly Sanskritized caste was dominant, the culture of the entire region underwent a certain degree of Sanskritization. Alright, so the culture itself, like dhira dhira the change happens, so that is why we call it as a micro, you can say localized version of social change, endogenous and a localized version of social change. So in regions where non-Sanskritic castes were dominant, it was their influence that was stronger, and this can be termed as a process of desanskritization. That means Brahmins copying the Kshatriyas or other castes, alright, or other caste copying other caste, upper to bottom. So there were regional variations also in Punjab. Culturally, Sanskritic influence was never strong. Matlab Sanskritic influence, alright. So Sanskrit was never strong in cultures like Punjab. So there were, of course, regional variations and exceptions to this. Srinivas argued that since Sanskritization improves the position of a group only in local caste hierarchy, it does not necessarily lead to any structural change. ऑलराइट. सो मतलब उसके बाद उन्होंने कहा कि हाँ भाई ये सब हो रहा है, बहुत बढ़िया प्रोसेस चल रहा है वगैरह वगैरह, पर ऐसा स्ट्रक्चरल चेंज नहीं हो जाता है, लिमिटेड है थोड़ा सा, ठीक है. The impact and the significance of Sanskritization is manifold. It is viewed as a process that facilitated socio-cultural mobility in Indian society, which is generally viewed as closed and monolithic. Alright, closed society है, monolithic society. अब socio-cultural mobility कैसे हो रही है इस प्रोसेस से जो कि Sanskritization है. Alright, it can also be used as a mental construct to understanding social change in India. Like people want to be better off economically, socially, so they Sanskritize. Alright, so it is used as a tool with the sociologists and anthropologists. Its influence can be seen in language, literature, ideology, music, dance, drama, and style of life, and the ritual also. Alright, so what does Yogendra Singh have to say about Sanskritization? We saw Yogendra Singh on modernization before. He says that Sanskritization is culturally specific case of universal motivation towards anticipatory socialization of culture of the higher group in the hope of gaining its status. So, alright, so he defines Sanskritization as a culturally specific case of the universal motivation toward anticipatory socialization of the culture of the higher group in the hope of gaining status in future. Alright, so the hope is of gaining status in future. Yogendra Singh writes that there are two levels of the meaning which are implicit in Sanskritization. Firstly, it is historical specific. In historical specific sense, Sanskritization refers to those processes in Indian history which lead to changes in various castes. It is indicative of indigenous source of social change in the broad historical spectrum of India. So it is history specific. Then it is contextual specific. In the contextual specific sense, Sanskritization denotes complementary process of cultural imitation of upper caste by lower or subcaste in different parts of India. So it is not a like uniform phenomena, which means it differs like as per the particular contextual specific. Now we will see certain criticisms of Sanskritization. D.N. Majumdar says that there are many signs of reverse processes like desanskritization. Many upper castes are forsaking their lifestyle as well. Kashmiri Pandits and Brahmins in Haryana and Punjab are examples. It can be criticized for exaggerating social mobility. मतलब basically दूसरा point ये कहता है कि भाई social mobility or the scope of lower caste to move up the social ladder, it can be criticized for this. Basically for it leads to no structural change, only positional change. और position change करके होगा भी क्या, मतलब structure तो change हो ही नहीं रहा. They're doing what they were doing, just copying, alright, so that they can look like, but look like does not mean become like, alright. They are just doing look like, they are not become like, alright. So in other words, inequality continues to persist, though some individuals may be able to improve their positions within the unequal structure. Alright, it has also been pointed out that the ideology of Sanskritization accepts the ways in which upper caste are superior and those of lower caste as inferior. Therefore, the desire to imitate upper caste is seen as natural and desirable. Srinivas himself is accused of succumbing to the values of other castes. So, Sanskritization seems to justify a model that rests on inequality and exclusion. It appears to suggest that to believe in purity and pollution of groups of people is justifiable. Therefore, to be able to look down on some groups as upper castes, look down on the lower castes is deemed to mark as a privilege. In effect, such a trend is that the key characteristics of Dalit culture and society are eroded. So, as per this particular statement, basically inequality and exclusion is there, and basically you do not have to like पूरा पढ़ते हैं. For example, the very worth of labor in which lower caste do is degraded and the activity is rendered shameful. So societal perspective ये कहता है कि जो लोग समझते हैं कि there is this work and that is how they count it as. So this is there. Then fifth point is Sanskritization led to seepage of evils in dominant caste to lower castes. डाउरी इज एन एग्जाम्पल. लोअर कास्ट में डाउरी नहीं होती थी पर डोमिनेंट कास्ट में होती थी. ब्राह्मणिज्म ने उसे इन्फोर्स किया और ये सीपेज ऑफ इवल्स, this caused the seepage of evils also. Srinivas is also accused of ignoring the non-Sanskritic traditions, as some elements of non-Sanskritic tradition might become a part of Sanskritic tradition in a locality. Further, it was not a uniform phenomena, as we saw North India, Punjab, Islamic tradition also provided basis for cultural imitation. Then according to Harold Gould, the Sanskritization is camouflage for latent intercaste and interclass competition for economic and social power. So it is something, a latent process which is happening. Further, Srinivas took Sanskritization to mean some kind of Brahminization, while other investigations have shown that it could be based on Kshatriya also, Vaishya also, and Shudra model also. So Sanskritization is thus only an illustration of universal reference group process which happens. So it is just that. So people, that is how they criticized it. We started from the argument by D.N. Majumdar. Then we conclude this as a process of social change in contemporary India which has lost much of its relevance due to reservation policy, rise of Dalit consciousness which is happening. Okay, this is very good. Then westernization replacing Sanskritization, democratic polity among other factors. Erstwhile depressed classes are now recognizing their numerical strength and using politics and socio-economic processes to assert their own identity rather than imitating the Dvija born castes. Alright, so despite such changes and much criticism, the concept is still known for providing unconventional perspective into the Indian society in general. Alright, we saw this as the study of quirks, which was very important. Alright, and caste system is in particular. Alright, out of the detailed frameworks which change the very face of the approaches to the study of the Indian society. So today we covered Sanskritization, we covered G.S. Ghurye and some parts of M.N. Srinivas. Thank you so much for watching this lecture. See you in the next lecture. Thank you.